The museum here, compared with natural history museums elsewhere, is really a relic.
There's something estimated about 2 million specimens in the collection and probably only about 10,000 on display in Merrion Street, whereas the rest are here.
There's always been massive public interest in the museum, so I think that people will be very excited when this building opens again, yeah. Yeah, everyone misses it very much.
It's a massive collection, and I think once it becomes open to people, the value of it will just increase incrementally.
Dublin's Natural History Museum closed its doors to the public in July 2007, following the collapse of an exterior staircase, making it the longest closure of the building since it first opened in 1857.
The exhibitions are the obvious part of a museum for the average member of the public, and when they come up and they see a closed sign, they think that's it, it's all stopped. And people wonder, where do I work now, and do I have anything to do? A lot of people won't realise that most of the staff of the museum work behind the scenes, and the exhibition and the level of public activity in the exhibition spaces is almost completely irrelevant to their average day.
When you get to see the behind of a museum, you really want everybody to see it, because I don't think people appreciate it when they come in and they see, yeah, you've X amount of things on display. They don't get an idea of how much there is to deal with.
A major restoration of the museum has since been cancelled, and in its place, a temporary exhibition of natural history is due to be opened at the Riding School in Collins Barracks.
The Riding School exhibition is a selection, if you like, a sample of natural history. Whilst Merrion Street is not open to the public, it was decided to put an exhibition of natural history together to keep us in the public eye. It's like a selection box, a few favourites and some new treasures that haven't been seen before. I'm looking for the skull of a Romeleosaurus, which is a plesiosaur, a marine reptile from the Jurassic. We have several good ones, but this one in particular we're going to put on display in the riding school, just the skull. You'll get more idea of how it fits together. So you can get a sense of them there anyway. These were big animals. The Loch Ness Monster, the idea that people have of what that looks like is more or less based on a plesiosaur.
The museum's archive in Beggar's Bush houses the majority of its 2 million specimens, many of which have never before been seen in public.
This building is a dedicated collections facility, so all of the scientific holdings of the museum are stored here. There's no public access to this building, but it's a place where scientists, students, and researchers can come to access the collections material and use it for research purposes and for study.
Because it's storage, everything's so compacted, you kind of get a better idea of the immensity of the collection, because you open a drawer upon drawer upon drawer upon drawer, and it just keeps unfolding, and you can never seem to see an end to it, especially with the deer room and things like that, and you just, all these really old things all together.
All sorts of really exciting things that the public don't even know we have, and that's one of the reasons we're putting on temporary exhibitions, is to start to bring those out.
The archive houses many former exhibits, from buildings which were demolished in 1962 to make way for an extension of Leinster House.
When the buildings were lost, we lost most of our geological exhibition space. So that's one of the reasons that you don't see rocks, minerals, fossils in this building.
Amongst the displays from the fossil hall are the distinctive wall-mounted skeletons dating from the Jurassic era.
In this room, we have a lot of our large marine reptiles, like ichthyosaurs here and here, over there, and plesiosaurs. These are the monsters of the Jurassic seas from about 150, 200 million years ago. And these are mostly as they were taken down from the fossil hall in 1962. These would have been mounted on the walls, one above each other, so that you could see them close up.
The archive's enormous collection poses many challenges for its staff as to how and what should be curated.
There's so much stuff that we can't possibly ever prepare all of it to its best ability, and that's a frustration, and it's something that we work with constantly, a balance between making stuff accessible and making it beautiful, basically. On the other hand, with scientific collections, the specimen doesn't need to be beautiful in order for its scientific data to be accessible to researchers.
The Barrington collection consists of over 20,000 birds. At the turn of the 20th century, Robert Barrington asked all lighthouse keepers in Ireland to send him the remains of birds who struck their lighthouses. The collection was recently curated in the archive, with the birds' remains still intact in their original envelopes.
So these are the envelopes. It says here there's 2 blackbirds killed striking North Arran Lighthouse. So they sent 2 wings in this case, one from each of the blackbirds that struck the lighthouse, and it's also got the claw attached.
Specimens from the museum and archive are the focus of an extensive radiological study by the School of Diagnostic Imaging at University College Dublin, including remains from the Barrington collection. The rhinoceros skeleton on the mammal floor of the museum has attracted the attention of Dr. Louise Rainford.
If we look at the normal limb, first of all, we can see the radius and we can see the ulna, and it's how we'd expect the bone to appear. But if you compare that directly with this limb, you can see that the differentiation has gone here, and this is the type of abnormality we see commonly with past cases of osteomyelitis, where there has been some sort of bony infection and the bones have actually fused together.
Dr. Rainford has also noticed an abnormally large tooth abscess, which seems to have broken through the rhino's jawbone.
And that, coupled with this type of deformity in its foreleg, obviously the animal suffered whilst in the wild.
Whilst the museum remains closed to the public, its staff are assembling a catalogue of its entire collection for the first time ever, bringing them deeper into the museum's history than ever before.
Because although the museum is 150 years old, it has very substantial collections in the region of 2 million specimens. So it's never been possible with the staff we've had, with all the things we were expected to do, to get a catalogue of the entire collection.
I think a classic moment was when we were up in the big cat's case upstairs and one of the girls picked up the lion cub and its paw fell off. And it was not because of her fault, it was because the paw had fallen off at some other point, but somebody had very delicately put it back in. I think it's things like that you'll suddenly realise how fragile things are. I mean, it's just because they've been there for so long and nobody's had to touch them, that's the only reason they survived.
So I think as you research individual animals in the museum collections, they sort of get inside your head and they don't go away. And that's one of the fascinations for me, that having worked here for over 20 years, you can still find things that you knew nothing about.
This is the tiger who came in June of 1913 on the 25th. And he was given number 167 for that year. He was given, actually the skin was given along with the skull by His Majesty King George V, as you can see there. So he would have arrived as just a skin, but the tiger is mounted in a very traditional way for that period of the time. You might notice that tiger is cowering. Like, he's not in a natural fearsome pose like an awful lot of the animals out there are.
Over time, when England started to occupy India at a greater and greater level, the tiger came to stand in for the whole subcontinent, for all of its people. So most of the tigers that were taxidermied in the Victorian period are crouching and looking up at the viewer with this kind of sneaky, threatening, snarling kind of a look. And a lot of the animals in the collection function that way. You know, the lion that's in the same case functions as England standing tall and proud and vigilant over this crouching, crafty tiger that represents India.
The polar bear would have been the first polar bear to have been seen in Ireland, and it came to us in the 1850s, before this building was even built. It was shot in Arctic Canada by an explorer, Leopold McClintock of Dundalk, who was part of a British Navy expedition looking for a missing voyage led by a man called John Franklin.
The Franklin expedition is amongst the most tragic maritime losses of the Victorian era. All 139 men, including Franklin, perished whilst searching for the Northwest Passage. A number of relief expeditions were sent out to investigate the fate of Franklin's fleet, led by Leopold McClintock.
He explored along various coastlines looking for evidence of Franklin and his voyage and where he might have gone. And in the process, they encountered polar bears. The polar bear was actually shot at least 11 times by a number of people, including McClintock.
He was also food. They ate that bear after they shot him. And there's records of some bears that it wasn't the first or last polar bear that they ate. People in the period seeing this bear would have known his history. The label itself that says who shot the bear, where he came from, would have told a whole story about a lost hero and the heroic men who went to find him. And so when you look at the way he's taxidermied with the bullet hole left in his head and, you know, the snarling teeth and his sort of great bulk sort of hulking forward, all of that is part of that mythology, that he's a symbol of the wild north that's been tamed and stilled.
One of the people who would have grown up in late Victorian Dublin was Ernest Shackleton. And I can't imagine him never coming to the Natural History Museum when there were so few things for young people to do. And he is certainly known to have spoken to McClintock before he headed off on his own expeditions. So I'd love to think of the idea of the polar bear giving Shackleton that inspiration that there's something very exciting out there to go and explore.
Coming up, we'll see how Spotticus the giraffe finds a new residence in Collins Barracks, and what happens to King George's tiger when it takes a trip to Holland.